Hello guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Hit the bell icon button so that you don't miss out any tutorial.
In this video we're going to see how to create a new controller. We're going to add a submit method. We're going to check the parameters from the request in our controller, and finally we're going to add some validation to the form and show errors, and we're going to see how to customize the error messages and validation attributes. Okay, so as we saw on our first videos, a controller is some place or a file to handle our application's logic. So if we go to the Laravel web page, we can see that instead of defining all of your request handling logic as closures in route files, you may wish to organize this behavior using controller classes. Controllers can group related request handling logic into a single class. Controllers are stored in the app HTTP controllers directory. So what is a closure? Let's go to our route files, and here we have web.php, and as we can see here, this is a closure. Okay, it's a function defined on the fly. So imagine that instead of this we have 100 lines of code. Then we will have all of our application logic in this file, and this is not good. So the best thing is to have modules on your application, and controllers allows us to do that. So let's start by checking this, and now we are creating a new controller with the artisan command line. So I'm going to open a new console. I'm going to development basic website, and you can create a new controller using artisan make controller, and I'm going to name it contact controller. So as a convention, you should add controller as a suffix of the name and just hit enter, and you have created a new controller, and we can see it from app HTTP controllers contact controller. Okay, so the namespace or the directory that this controller is app HTTP controllers, as we said. And as we saw in the last video, as we are handling requests, here we have the use illuminate. Illuminate is just Laravel HTTP request. So in this video we're going to see how to handle this request. Okay, so let's add a submit method. Public function submit. And let's return 1, 2, 3 and try this function. Okay, so the way to do this is to erase the closure and just call contact controller at submit. Okay, so now if we call contact submit through our form, this should call the submit function on the contact controller, and this should return 123. And we have 123. So this is working correctly. Okay, we added a submit method. Now we should check the request, the fields or the parameters that comes with this request, okay? So as we can see here, we have request implemented, so we can receive the request as a parameter for this function, okay? Now we have request, and instead of returning 123, I'm going to die and dump this request variable, and we will see what this is going to show. Great. So we have a lot of things here, as you can see. Here we have our request parameters. Of course, as we didn't insert any data, they are all null. And we have the headers of the request, encodings, path info, for example, request URI, which is contact submit, the method, which could be post or get or anything else. And this is all the information that our controller is receiving through this request variable. So if we want to retrieve some of the parameters or all of the parameters from our form, for example, we can use the input method, and let's say that we want to retrieve the email, so you just type email. And we have null, of course. So if we enter something here like john@doe.com, now we have john@doe.com. So we are actually getting our parameters from the form, okay? We can check this out. And now we are ready to add some validation using Laravel validation requests. Of course, we can use HTML, for example, like this. Going to our contact view, and we can add here the required attribute. So in this way, this can't be blank, okay? Let's go back for a moment. Of course, you can add some front-end validation with JavaScript and with these HTML attributes, but now we are adding some backend validation. You should always have backend validation, because if you have front-end validation only, the user can actually disable the JavaScript from the browser. Of course, you have to know how, and then your form wouldn't have validation. And this could be really dangerous in terms of security, okay? Besides of having front-end validation, you should always have back-end validation, because the user can't control your backend, okay? So now we're going to see how to add a backend validation. Let's search for Laravel validation. And let's read for a moment that Laravel provides several different approaches to validate your application's incoming data. By default, Laravel's base controller class uses a validate request thread, which provides a convenient method to validate incoming HTTP requests with a variety of powerful validation rules. So you have two kinds of validations. For example, with the validate method, or a more organized or cleaner way to do this is with form request validation through creating form requests. So for more complex validation scenarios, you may wish to create a form request. Form requests are custom request classes that contain validation logic. To create a form request class, use the make request artisan CLI command. So let's do this, okay? Add validation using Laravel validation requests. I'm going to copy this. And we have PHP artisan make request. And we're going to add contact request. This is a convention as well. And now here in HTTP folder, we have a requests folder with our contact request file with two main methods, authorize and rules. Here we are going to write our validation rules, okay? For example, if we want the name to be required, we can just write name required. Okay, and now we have to tell the controller to use this request. So we are not receiving a regular request anymore, but a contact request. Okay, now let's see what happens here. We have an error. Class app HTTP controller's contact request does not exist. And this is because we should add this to our controller. We have to use app HTTP requests contact request. So action is unauthorized, and that's because we have an authorized method here, and let's read this. Determine if the user is authorized to make this request. So this means that in this function you can add logic to see whether the user is allowed to make this request or not. So for us, this should be true. And now it works. So as you can see, it's redirecting us to our contact form instead of showing, for example, 1, 2, 3. And this is because this is not filled. Okay, now it's working. So now we have our validation requests, and it's time to see how to show the validation errors, okay? Because this is throwing an error, but we should show it to the user. So let's go back to Laravel web page. And here we have the displaying validation errors, okay? So we should add this to our page or our template. And I'm going to add this to first of all to our contact page, like this. So if we have any errors, let's display an alert danger. This is Bootstrap. And we have a for each loop with the global errors variable. So we loop for each error and we show the error in the page. Okay, let's see if this works. Now everything is empty. And if I hit submit, now I have the error displayed. Okay, so the name field is required. Great. So let's add, for example, some few more validation rules for email. We need that this field to be required and it needs to be an email. Okay, where do you see these validation rules? Here in Laravel web page. Here you have all the available validation rules. Okay, so for example, if we have an email, we can click here and it says the field under validation must be formatted as an email address. So let's check this out. The email can't be blank, so it's required and should be an email. Okay, so let's try this first. Okay, the name field is required and the email field is required. Now I'm going to insert the name and now shows that the email field is required, and I'm putting here anything, for example, John. And okay, this is the error from HTML. Okay, I'm going to remove this for a while in contact blade. So let's say that you have text type. So this is John Doe and John. Let's see what happens. Now I have another error message that says that email must be a valid email address. Okay, so you can do the same thing with every validation rule that you want. So you have required, if condition, it's true, required, unless, integer, before date, boolean, date, max, less than, active URL. So every validation rule has its own parameters and its own way to implement it. Okay, so let's get back to the type email, and now we have the HTML validation, and if for some reason this fails, we have our backend validation. Okay, so we have name required, email required, and email type. What else do we have? Subject and message. So let's make all these fields required. And let's see how it goes. Great, so the 4 fields are required now, okay? So I think we can check this out, and now we can customize our error messages and validation attributes. Let's see how. We go to the top of the page. We have, for example, customizing the error messages. Let's say that we do not like this text and we want to customize this or change this, okay? So we have to add a function named messages to our request file. So here we will have public function messages, and here we can return an array with custom messages. So for example, for name, when it is required, I want to show another message. For example, you should fill the name field. Okay, and it changed. And you can do this for every message that you want to show for validation rules. Now, let's say that you want to change the, for example, instead of showing the email field, you want to show that the email address field is required. So you can change the name attribute. How? Adding a function, an attributes function to the same file. So let's type public function attributes and return another array. And let's grab email and change it for email address. Now, instead of the email field, we will have the email address field is required. Okay? So we can check this item out. And now we have a new file called contact request, and the workflow goes like this. The user enters to the contact route, which is a get route, and this returns the contact view. So we go here, and we have a form that displays 4 fields. When the user clicks submit, this takes us to the route name contact form submit, which is this route, because we put this name on the last video. Now this redirects or uses the submit method of the contact controller. So let's see the contact controller submit method. If this works okay, for example, John Doe, john@doe.com, this is the subject, message. We have 1, 2, 3 because we are not interacting with the database yet. Now we have validation on this form, okay? So the way to add a backend validation is this. We received a contact request as a variable, and Laravel automatically redirects the flow of the application to this file. So it says name should be required, email as well, and it should be a valid email, and the same with subject and message. Okay? Now for the name, when it is required, this message should be displayed, and when a validation message that includes email is displayed, you should display email address. So here's the thing. If any of these validation rules fails, the application stops here and returns to the contact blade, with this variable being not empty. So this will be shown. If these validation rules are all true, so they are all fulfilled, the flow of the application continues, enters this method. So in this case, you should see 1, 2, 3. Okay? So this is the flow of the contact page. In this video, we are going to see how to interact with the database and actually save a message that is sent by the user. Okay? So we're going to create a new database, configure it in our env file. We're going to create a new model. We're going to see what are migrations and run migrations. And of course, we're going to save the message sent by the user. And finally, we are going to add a message so the user knows that the message was sent successfully. Okay? So first of all, we're going to create a new database using phpMyAdmin. I think I have to run XAMPP. Let's see. Here, Control P. Great. Okay, so I'm going to create a new database. I'm going to call it basic website. Great. So that's one thing left to do. And now I have to configure it in our env file. I'm going to our project env. So we have our database connection, and the database name is basic website. Okay, so this should work, and we have to check this out. Okay, so as we saw, a model is an entity that represents a table on the database. Okay, so now we have to create a new table called messages. So in this way, we can save the messages sent by the user or the users. So I'm going to open a new console, and we're going to use the PHP artisan command in this way, make model, and I'm going to call it message. This should be singular. And if I add the M option, it will create a migration file which we are going to see in the next few seconds. Okay, so this created our model and a migrations file. We can see our model in app message. Okay, I always like to create a new folder called models and just put this in here. Okay, so take a look at this, because this is not namespace app, but app models. Okay, this is very important. So as you can see, this uses Illuminate, which is Laravel, database component, Eloquent, and model, and this extends a model. Okay, great. So we created a new model, and here we can see the migrations in database migrations. You can see the Laravel structure is really simple and intuitive. And here we have our migration file. Okay, great. So what are migration? What is actually a migration? Let's take a look at Laravel page. And let's see what it says. Migrations are like version control for your database, allowing your team or you to easily modify and share the application's database schema. Okay? Migrations are typically paired with Laravel's schema builder to easily build your application's database schema. If you have ever had to tell a teammate to manually add a column to their local database schema, you face the problem that database migrations solve. So we have the schema facade that provides database agnostic support for creating and manipulating tables across all of Laravel's supported database systems. So the main thing here is that we have a migration file, in this case create messages table, and we have the date of creation here, and we have two main methods, up and down, and this is using the schema facade, which is included here. Okay, so as you can see, the down function just checks if the messages table exists and drops it, so it deletes it. Okay, and for the up function, we have to create our table with the columns and its types, etc. Okay, so I'm going to check this out, and we're going to edit the message migration file so we can create our table, because we don't have any table yet in this database. So as you can see, Laravel comes with users migration and password resets table. This comes by default, and it creates, for example, a new table called users, which will have an ID field, a string, which is going to be a name, an email, which should be unique, a timestamp, password, and remember token field, and timestamps. This creates two fields in our table. One which is created at, and another one which is going to be updated at. So you can have a log, or you can know when it was created or modified that element in the table. So for the down method, it's the same thing. And we have our passwords reset table, which has an email and a token and a created at column. So I'm going to close this, and we need to create our messages table. So if we go to our view, as we saw on the last video, we have 4 fields: name, email, subject, and message. Okay. So here we have to create a new string called name, and yes, we have a string called email, email. Then we will have the subject, and finally we will have the text message. We don't want this to be a string but a longer text. So I'm going to grab, let's return to Laravel page and check the column types. For example, we have, for example, a text column, or long text. Okay, so I'm going to use text for this. And this is going to be the message, if I remember correctly. Name, message, yes. Okay, we're going to save this, and here we have our table. So now it's time to run the migrations. Let's see how to run our migrations. Running migrations. So to run all of your outstanding migration, execute the migrate artisan command, which is php artisan migrate. So let's do that, and let's see what happens. php artisan migrate. So it migrated all of our migrations file correctly. So this should create 3 tables. In this case, we have 4 because Laravel create one for its own migration check. So if we enter here, we're going to see that the 3 migration files were run. And here we have our users table, our password resets table, and of course our messages table, which has an ID, a name, an email, subject, message, and the timestamps. So this is pretty simple. And now you have something like a version control for your database, and it's really much easier to share your database structure when you are developing a new application. Great. So let's see what we have left on our list. We have checked the recently created tables, and now it's time to pass data to the model and save it. So this means that we're going to grab the information that comes from the contact form and actually save it to the messages table, which is empty right now. Great, so let's do that. I'm going to close this. And let's remember that in our contact form, when you click on submit, we redirect our flow to this route, contact form submit. So if we see this route, this calls contact controller submit. Okay, so we should go to controllers, contact controller, submit function. Now we have to retrieve the parameters from the form, which are in request variable, and save it to our message table /model. Okay. So this is really simple using Eloquent. I'm going to create a new variable that's called message. And we're going to use the message model. So new message. Okay. As we are using a message model, we should include it here. Use app models message. And now we can save or store our data in a very simple way, because we can call message name, and here we will have request input name. And is the same thing for the other fields like email, subject, and message. These two columns are filled automatically. So I'm going to copy and paste this. And here we have email, subject, and message, and subject. And now we should actually save the model to the database with the save function. Great, so do you understand this? If you do, now we have to, for example, redirect our user to the home page. So for this, we are going to use the return directive, and let's see how to redirect to one of our named routes. So let's look for Laravel redirect. Redirecting to named routes. When you call the redirect helper with no parameters, an instance of Illuminate routing redirector is returned, allowing you to call any method on the redirector instance. For example, generate a redirect response to a named route. You may use the route method. So we have return, redirect, route, and the name of the route. Let's copy this. And I want to redirect to our home route, which is called home. So let's replace this. And now we should be ready to go. Let's try this out and see if it works. We have an empty table. Let's go to contact, and I'm going to use John Doe. Great, let's submit this. And unknown database Laravel. This is because we didn't clear the cache. So let's type php artisan config cache. Let's try this again. And we've been redirected to our home page. So basically this means that this worked. So let's see it on the database. And now we have John Doe, subject, and message. Okay, so this worked successfully. We have a created @ and updated @ date. Okay, let's see our list. We have passed data to the model and save it, redirect to home page, have tested it, and now, of course, we can add a flash message to let the user know that everything went okay. So let's see in the Laravel page, for example, redirecting with flashed session data. Redirecting to a new URL and flashing data to the session are usually done at the same time. Typically, this is done after successfully performing an action when you flash a success message to the session. For convenience, you may create a redirect response instance and flash data to the session in a single fluent method change. So here we have our return redirect, and we should add the with directive with our session message. Like this. And I'm going to change this to success. And after the user is redirect, you may display the flashed message from the session, for example, using Blade. Like this. I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to change this message. For example, message successfully sent. Thank you. And we should add this to our home page because we are redirecting to our home page. So for example, we can add it here. And let's see if this works. Let's try this again. I'm going to put Jana at doe.com. Subject 2, message 2. Submit. And is not working. Let's see why. Success. I think the problem is this. Session success. And session success. Okay, let's try this again. As you can see, we have here our 2 messages. And let's try for a third one. Third name. Third at name.com. Subject 3. Message 3. Submit. And now we have our message. Great. I would like to do one more thing before we end this video. And this is, we have a alert to show a message here. And in the last video, we saw that we can show the validation errors with another alert. So maybe we can add this to the home page, the template, our template. For example, inside of the container after the showcase here, I'm going to include inc messages, and let's create a new file here called messages.blade.php. So here we have our errors and our success message as well. So let's see if this works. Contact, submit. Great, we have our validation errors, and let's try another one. I'm going to put my name. And here we have our message. Actually, this looks better than up here. So now we have a new message blade file, and we have included it into our template. So this is much more clean and organized. I hope you understood it, and that's it. We have our basic website almost complete. Now we have to retrieve the messages from the messages table and show it to the user. So we're going to create a new method in messages controller to get the messages. We're going to create a new view to see those messages. We're going to create a new route. And finally, we're going to retrieve the messages and send them to the new view. We are going to show those messages using Bootstrap's list group, which is very simple. And to round up our basic website, we're going to create a pages controller and add an active class to menu items. Okay, so let's start with creating a new method in messages controller to get the messages. So let's go to our project. I'm going to close this, and we have app HTTP controllers contact controller. So this is contact controller. And I am going to add a new method or function here. For example, get messages. Okay. So now we should retrieve the messages from the messages table and send them to a view. The way to do this with Eloquent is pretty simple. Can declare a new variable called messages and just call message model all. So in this way, we'll have all of our messages. Let's try this out with a dump and die or DT messages. Great, so we have our new method and we have to create a view to see these messages. So let's go to resources, views, new file, messages.blade.php. Keep in mind that this file has nothing to do with this file. This file is inside the include folder, so they are two different files. Great, so we want to extend our layout here. That's called app. And we will have a content. Let's see if I'm forgetting something. Yeah, we can add. No, that's it. And within the content, we will have our messages. In a few minutes, we're going to see how. Great. So let's create a new route to see the messages. We're going to routes web. And here we will have a new route, a get route. For example, messages. That's it. And this is going to call contact controller get messages. And I'm putting a name on it. This should be get messages. Right, so now we can try this out. Actually, I'm going to book here contact/messages. And if we open this up, local host /contact/messages. Here we have our array of 4 messages with all of our data. As you can see here, localhost phpMyAdmin. From last video, we have 4 messages, and here they are. So let's go back to our list, and we have created a new route. And let me add some, just for this course purposes, we're going to add a new item here to see the messages. So I'm going to the home page, the layout, the navbar, and let's add a new item to see the messages. So say messages, or contact messages. Okay, of course here we can replace this by route home, and the same thing for the other items. This should be about contact, and of course get messages. Great, now we have our messages button. Great, so now let's retrieve the messages. We've done this, and send them to the view. So here we have our messages, and now we should send them to the messages view. So I'm going to return here view messages, and we're going to send a messages called a variable called messages, and here we're going to send this variable. Great. So let's see if this works. I'm going to see messages and app not found. I think, yeah, we should add layouts here. Sorry. Great. Now this works, and of course it's blank because we don't have any content here yet. So let's go to our list. We have retrieved the messages and send them to the view. Now we have to show those messages in the view using Bootstrap's list group. So let's go back to our messages blade, and now we have a messages variable. So let's loop through it with a for each loop. For each messages as message, and for each. So for each message that we have, we're going to add an ordered list with class list group, and of course an item with class list group item and the 2 pixels padding list item. And here we would have the message name, and this would be the same for email, subject, and text. Sorry, this padding goes up here. And here we will have message, subject, and email. Great, so let's try this out. Refresh this, and now we have our 4 messages: John Doe, Jana Doe, third name, and Roman. So I think we can check this item. And now we have, our page almost done. Okay, about, contact, and see messages. Great, so let's finish this by adding a pages controller. I'm going to close this. I want to add a page controller so we don't have any logic in here. In this way, we can say that we want that the home page goes to pages controller at home. And this should return, of course, the home view. So let's create a new controller. Basic website, PHP artisan make controller pages controller. Let's go back to our project, and here we have our pages controller with a public function home, or actually get home. And this will return the home view. So I'm going to change this, get home. And this would be the same for contact. With get contact. And the same for about, with get about. Of course, we should add it here for about and contact. about contact and contact. So here you'll have all of your pages logicked, okay? So in this way you have your project more organized and clean, of course. Let's test it. So we have home, about, contact, and see messages. Understood? Okay, I'm going to close this. And if you can see here, this is a nicer view of the web.php, which is our routes file, and you understand better which routes are coming in and where are they going. So we can check this item. And last but not least, I want to add an active class to menu items, so we can see in which item or page we are. Great. So let's go to our home, navbar here. So what I want to do is to add an active class here. Take a look at this. Now this is highlighted. But we want to do this for every page. So if we are in contact, we want that contact to be highlighted. So let's erase this, and we should go for double colored braces. And for example, if we are in request slash, then I want we need request is. We want an active class, otherwise we do not want anything. So this is a shorthand operator from PHP, which means that if this condition is true, then show this, else show this. So I want to do this for every item on our navbar. So here we have about, and here we have contact, and here we have contact messages. Great, let's try this. So I have about, home, about, contact. It's not working. I think we should remove the slash. Now we have contact highlighted, about, see messages, and home. Of course, instead of checking for the specific request, we can check for the specific route. So here we can use request route get name, and if this equals to, for example, home, then show the active class. Let's try this out. We have about, and we have home highlighted. So in this way, we use the route's name instead of the route's path. So I'm going to replace this. And this route is called get messages. So this would be get messages. Well, let's try this out. I have syntax error. Yep, here. And here, and here. Now we have contact, see messages, about, and home highlighted. So in this way, as I said, we are using the routes names. Okay, so I think that would be it for this lecture and therefore this section 1. So we saw how to build a basic Laravel website. We've been through the routes, views, and layouts. We compiled our assets. We created a contact form with a post route and sent the data to our backend, our controllers. We managed to store the data in our database. We added some validation to our form. And finally, we retrieved those messages from the database. And we added something nice in terms of styling and view. But of course, this is a very simple website to get into Laravel and its structure. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you like the video, do give us a thumbs up and share it. Also check out amazing discounts and offers on our premium courses in the description below.